on in, sit back and relax. You're listening to episode 249 of the WealthTech Today podcast. I'm your host, Craig Iskowitz, founder of Ezra Group Consulting. And this podcast features interviews, news, and analysis on the trends and best practices all around wealth management technology. My guest for this episode was Mike Sha, founder and CEO of SigFig. I've known Mike for quite some time, and he's been running SigFig for quite some time as well. And they've been doing very well and doing some very interesting things in the market recently. So I thought it'd be a good time to have Mike on. Now, of course, Mike's been running SigFig, I think, for over 13 years now. Before that, he was the CEO and co-founder of an application called Wiki Invest. And before that, he worked at Amazon.com with a degree in computer science, which I appreciate as a fellow computer science degree holder as well. So we always have a good conversation and always get a little bit more technical than maybe some other conversations we have. Mike and I spoke about Mike shared some updates and statistics on how SigFig is doing. We talked about a little bit how advisors should adapt to the threats of AI and some new products that SigFig has recently released, including their Engage virtual meeting product. But before I get started, let's talk about tech stacks. Now, here at Ezra Group, we've seen tech stacks from hundreds of RIAs and broker-dealers. And let me tell you, most of them are loaded down with tech debt. And let's face it, tech debt acts like an anchor holding down your company's ability and efficiency to scale. So if you want to free your firm for exponential growth, you need to run, not walk, to our website, EzraGroup.com, and click on the golden Contact Us button on the homepage. Our experienced team here can evaluate your current tech ecosystem, deliver targeted recommendations, optimize your existing systems and operations, even run an RFP and help you pick some new software, and then even implement it to get your firm to the next level. You can take advantage of our free initial consultation by going to EzraGroup.com. A few quick housekeeping items that we always do before the interview. Please subscribe to the show wherever you listen to podcasts so you don't miss an episode. Check out investinothers.org. That's the Invest in Others Charitable Foundation. They do a lot of good work in our industry, raising money to donate to charities that are either run by or helped by financial advisors. All right, ready to go. Let's kick this thing off. Here we go with our next guest on the program. I'm excited to introduce Mike Sha, founder and CEO of SigFig. Hey, Mike, good to talk to you, man.
Great to be here.
I'm glad you're back. It's been a bit since you were on the program. Where are you calling in from?
San Francisco.
Ah, lovely San Francisco. I see that your fake background looks beautiful. It could look very similar now. It's a nice time of year to be in San Francisco.
As many would like to believe I might be the last person still in San Francisco, but
there's at least the last person leaving San Francisco, please turn out the lights. I'm glad you're holding down the fort. Great. Let's jump in. Can you provide our listeners with a 30-second elevator pitch for SigFig?
Sure. So we have been in the space for a long time, and we basically build technology that helps advisors and their firms be more productive, more efficient. We started out in building I guess what people would call a TAMP, an investment advisory platform. And over the years, we've added quite a few new solutions. So we've got one solution that focuses on meeting and sales effectiveness, virtual collaboration. We've got a whole bunch of AI that I'm sure we'll talk about at some point today, built into our products. And all in the service of working with banks, wealth management firms, and insurance companies.
So that leads me into one of the questions that we would discuss talking about was what is SigFig and how do you describe it now? Do you describe it as a TAMP? Do you describe it as a platform, RIA platform, broker-dealer platform, outsource provider? How do you describe the company and what you're doing?
Yeah, so we've built what we think of as an integrated platform. So it's an ecosystem of solutions that can be used individually, but they can also be used together. And they're all aimed at essentially helping to enrich the value that's added by advisors in serving their clients. So part of where we started was in investment management, actually what people used to call robo-advice. And I think in retrospect, people will realize that that term robo-advice actually was not super helpful. It didn't really describe what the value proposition was. And so I like to think of it as the natural evolution of the value proposition of what advisors do. So in the early days, most advisors tended to focus on managing portfolios. And today, advisors do a lot more than that. Investment management is actually oftentimes a commodity. Sometimes it's controlled by the home office, and so the advisor's not actually going off the rails and building their own portfolios, but they are doing financial planning, they're doing trust and estate planning, they're helping with client servicing, all kinds of tax management. So there's a lot of other things that advisors are doing beyond portfolio management, and it turns out technology can help a lot in that. So whether it's tools to enable financial planning discussions, or whether it's technology that helps clients meet with advisors virtually, or whether it's AI that's helping the advisor automate a lot of their kind of manual work. Lots of ways that technology can basically help advisors, improve the way they serve their clients. So I think TAMP is actually kind of an interesting term because it was born in the era where portfolio management was the value proposition, right? And so I don't think we think of ourselves as a TAMP, but I think many of the things that we do may be things that the legacy TAMPs may be wanting to do to add more value. So that one might think of the world that way, but we don't think of ourselves as a TAMP.
Do you still offer, I don't use the word robo advice, do you still offer digital advice? So self-directed onboarding, self-directed channel for advisory firms that you would manage?
Yeah, so we do. We think of that as really a choice of our partners. So we partner with financial institutions who want to use our technology to serve their clients. And some firms have very, 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 very large populations of retail clients. And so more than anything, a self-service model is just the most economical way to serve a smaller client. But most of our firms that we work with today have the vast majority of their assets managed through advisors. And so it turns out robo-advice was like kind of a horror term for an advisor because it kind of suggested that maybe the software was going to replace the human. And we're kind of getting a second round of that fear with AI, right? There's a lot of talk out there about how AI is going to take everyone's jobs. And so, again, like I think our view is that it's less about the technology being built to serve a service model. It's more about technology that helps make the client experience better. And whether that happens to be self-service or whether it's through advisors, that's really a choice of our partner, and it's really a choice of their advisors, how they want to use our technology.
I work on the advisor tech map with Michael Keats's, and
Mm.
we used to have a robo advised category, which
Mm-hmm.
we renamed to onboarding or automated onboarding, right? Because
Oh,
that's
interesting.
what most of the robo advisors did at first. It
Mm-hmm.
was just onboarding, really. They didn't do anything more than that. But then they
Mm-hmm.
slowly morphed, as you guys did as well, and expanded your capabilities slowly into, as you mentioned, you're like an ecosystem of solutions. And many of the other vendors that were doing in the similar space also had to keep morphing or keep changing what they were doing to survive and expanding, as you guys have effectively expanded. So we do see, but we still see a need, as you are, for advisors who want small account solutions or younger demographic solutions in parallel to their traditional offerings.
That's right. And I think in parallel is actually an important kind of way to think about it. I think there was kind of a misconception that robo advice was going to replace traditional ways of serving clients. And in fact, I think it sits alongside, right? It's a particular service model at a particular price point for a particular kind of client. But it's not like a replacement of, the traditional ways of doing business. So it's an important part of the suite of offerings for many firms. But I think the real beauty is a lot of the technology that made robo-advice possible actually also makes the operations of working with advisors and traditional advisory, service models better as well. So, whether it's onboarding or investment management or, all the other kind of pieces of technology that were built to try to build a business of scale, that same technology can help advisors scale as well.
That's what it's all about. Got to scale up our holistic advice.
Absolutely.
Talking about industry trends, if we could shift in, you mentioned AI and how AI won't take jobs. Or AI is, people are worried it's going to take their jobs. And I'm always saying it's not going to take jobs, but it's going to shift them into something completely different. Just like we saw email shift jobs, move the capabilities down the food chain or up the food chain. Whereas in the past, the old days, an executive would dictate a memo to his secretary or his admin who would type it, show him a paper, he would mark it with a pencil, and then they would put it into an interoffice envelope and send it to another executive. Now the executive just goes into his own email or in her own email and just types it herself. Well, the secretary's job still has a job. They still have admins and executives, admins and chiefs of staff. They just have a lot more stuff to do and a lot more tools to do it with.
Yeah.
So how do you see AI changing how advisors are interacting with, specifically with SigFig's ecosystem?
Yeah. So, when you think about the march of technology, I think with almost every major transformation that's ever happened in the last 100 years, I'm sure with every transformation, there's been some fear that like, oh, this is going to, either change the way we work or, make the way we work obsolete. And the truth is, in almost every instance I can think of, what's actually happened is that the technology has been empowering to, the worker. And, I think AI has some potential to be different on that front. There is lots of smart minds, picturing a world where like this is really just going to be so fundamentally transformative. But I think in the near term, it's not AI that's going to replace advisors. But advisors that adopt AI really well might threaten, the existence of advisors that don't. And so it's really more, how do you embrace these capabilities so that honestly you have more time to spend with clients adding real value? Like one of the things that I think has been remarkable for me to see, coming from the outside, right? Before SigFig, I worked at Amazon, in a completely unrelated field. And as I've spent lots of time with the home office, lots of time with advisors over the last decade, it is kind of mind-blowing how much time is spent doing things that are honestly not that much value add. And so if you could leverage technology to do all those things for you so that you'd have so much more time to spend with clients doing things that add value, things that, humans can uniquely add value on. Think about how much happier your clients will be. Think about how many more clients you could serve. Think about how much more of their assets you could manage well. Like it's absolutely, the name of the game here is like give advisors more time so that they can spend it on things that really add value. And so I guess, part of your question was a little bit, well, how is AI going to kind of impact the industry? And I think you could almost start with like, well, what are all the things that advisors spend time on that we could give them their time back? And that list is incredibly long. There's middle and back office stuff. There's home office stuff. There's, the writing of notes from client meetings. There's the remembering of things to do for your clients. There's, getting accounts opened and funded. There's, checking in on annual client reviews with clients. I mean, literally you could go on and on and on and on for things that, technology could help with. And so I think the name of the game is going to be, let's find all those things that, we could save people's time on. and try to use software to do those things, as well as, or, in some cases, maybe even more scalably than, the advisor could do without. And, that should free up advisors to do, lots of other valuable things.
So which areas of SigFig's ecosystem are you targeting first for AI enhancement? Like, where did you see the biggest value added? Because you're directing your limited programming resources at your ecosystem and saying, here, this is where we want to work on AI first. How did you determine that? Which areas did you
Yeah.
target first?
Yeah. So, the truth is first, I think we feel that the capabilities and the potential here are so potentially transformative that AI is making its way everywhere in our solutions. It's not just in one area, but I think your question was kind of where did it come first? And the most natural place that we saw it was in our solution that we call Engage. Um, Engage is a platform that was built during the pandemic to essentially facilitate advisors and clients having more effective virtual meetings. And of course, during the pandemic, the whole world got very comfortable with virtual meetings. So, it wasn't surprising that that was the original positioning of the
Thank
product.
God. I can work, I can stay home more.
But the funny thing is, even to this day, a lot of people equate virtual meetings to video conferencing. And the truth is, like, video conferencing is not better than in person. It might be more convenient, but I don't know a lot of people who feel like a video conference is richer than an in-person interaction. What we think really makes the virtual meeting context richer is actually the combination of audio video with what we call screen-based collaboration. Because in the old school world that was all in person, it was oftentimes very either unavailable or uncomfortable to introduce technology into that interaction. And so, people did business the old-fashioned way. They sat at a desk and they talked to each other. But it turns out talking is not the most efficient way of collaborating. Talking is useful. It's very, very valuable. But if you could overlay talking with looking at something together, think about how many Zoom meetings you're on where you're not just talking and looking, you're actually like doing screen sharing or you're like doing something with the other person.
As consultants, we do that every day. We're constantly
Exactly.
sharing our screens and sharing slides. I mean, we love slides. That's how we live.
That's right. Yeah, my guess is if you had the data for Zoom or Teams or whatever video conferencing platform you're on, the amount of time that's spent using one of the other tools beyond just video conferencing is probably very, very, very high.
We might know what that is because we record every call, and it does. One of it can tell us how much of the call is spent in screen sharing. That'd be interesting to
Oh,
know.
interesting. Yeah. And so the truth is, most financial institutions, most advisors, they've never really lived in a world where a meeting was more than, just video conferencing. And so we basically started introducing all these other technologies, right? Screen-based collaboration, interactive content. We integrated a lot of workflows. We kind of went on and on and on, looked at all the different technologies that could help assist the client and the advisor to actually get the work done. And we kept building out those capabilities. And so, how did we get on this question? You asked me, like, where did AI first make its way? And it turns out this idea of building software that helps enable more effective meetings and more efficient collaboration, that was a perfect place for AI to kind of insert itself. Now, the kind of interesting twist, we're a very kind of user-centric R&D shop. We really like to spend time with users, understanding what are their pain points, what are their problems, how can technology solve a problem, as opposed to, if you've got a hammer, everything looks like a nail. Like sometimes people are like, oh, AI, let's just like go out and deploy AI and solve problems that
Just
don't actually exist.
blast it everywhere.
Right. And so our view was like, well, let's really spend time trying to understand the workflow pain points of advisors. And then as we got into the conversation, one of the things that we realized is that we serve actually three constituents at the same time. We serve the advisor themselves, we serve the clients that they work with, and we serve the home offices that they work for. And it turns out AI's usefulness to each of those constituents is not always the same. And so, I think we've found that our most successful products have been where we bring value to all three of those constituents at the same time. So we came up with a big long list, over 20 different possible applications of AI in the space. And we started to spend real time with each of those constituents, clients, advisors, and home office, to try to figure out which of these features would you actually find most useful instead of us kind of inventing a solution to a problem that doesn't exist. And the world actually surprisingly quickly narrowed. There were some very clear patterns for the things that people found kind of most useful, most productive. And the irony was actually that the features that each of those constituents valued most weren't, always the same. And so, we had to find kind of the right ways to integrate all these capabilities so that, home office is happy, advisors happy, clients happy.
That's a
Now,
trifecta. Everyone's happy.
yeah, yeah, for sure. So, the launch of these capabilities, it's going to be kind of fascinating because, the amount of time that we save for each of those constituents is different. And so for the advisor, it's more about time savings, how do we help make your life easier? For the client, it's actually a little bit more about delight. There are a lot of clients who rip their hairs out working with their financial institutions because it's just so difficult to do things that would seem to be easy. So with client, it's kind of get financial institutions to the digital age where things work the way you'd expect as a consumer. And then with the home office, it's actually way more about consistency in sales process. It's about insight into what's happening in the distribution network. Many of the firms that we serve actually have thousands of advisors. So, it's very hard to create a consistent experience across, a large footprint. So part of how the technology can work is, to help create somewhat more consistent ways of doing business.
We see something similar. A lot of our clients, most of our clients are enterprise wealth management firms as well, broker dealers, large RIAs, and certainly sales process consistency is important, but consistency across all processes, whether it's sales, onboarding, rebalancing, reporting, all those processes have to be consistent.
Yeah, for sure.
So let's move on from that. Thank you for sharing. Want to talk about some company statistics. SigFig has been around quite a while. People don't realize. When were you founded?
2007 was the very beginning of the company.
Yeah.
We expanded kind of our product quite a few times, and we've been working with financial institutions for about a decade.
Decade's good. It's tough to stay in the business a decade. Can you share some statistics from the
Sure.
company?
Yeah. If you look at, kind of our platform, the easiest ways to kind of think about it are actually kind of some of the angles I said before. So, if you think about advisors, you think about end consumers, you think about the home office platform. So some of the kind of simplest metrics, one, assets that we help our partners manage on, the platform, that is now in excess of 50 billion. So it's gotten to some really nice scale. That hits about 1.5 million consumers. So when you think about kind of end consumers who have access to, our platforms. And then, metrics by advisors, about 6,000. So yeah, it's been kind of a nice journey over the last decade, seeing kind of more and more impact, of our solutions with our partners.
Can you clarify when you say 50 billion assets we help our clients to manage? Would that be AUM or AUA?
AUA. Yeah. Some of our solutions are designed to directly kind of discretionarily manage assets. And some of our solutions are essentially solutions that help assist, but aren't actually directly managing those assets.
So things like reporting, performance reporting will be included in there.
Yeah, we don't have like a performance reporting suite. I know there are companies in the world who like only do performance reporting.
Sure.
Our solutions are designed to be more kind of end to end, where the you know the assets are on a chassis that we are helping to digitize. So
So
yeah,
you're thinking more like portfolio management
sure.
capabilities, opening accounts, assigning models, things like that.
That's right. That's right.
Excellent. Thank you for that. Moving on to the next question, I wanted to talk about some new features being released. So you talked about the Engage platform. What about some of your other platforms? Any new features you recently released you want to talk about?
Yeah, we've got some very interesting capabilities that thematically organize in SigFig's R&D roadmap around a focus on helping advisors gather assets. I think one of the things that we have found over and over and over again is when we make it easier for firms and advisors to gather more assets, more wallet share, that makes everybody happy. And so we've got quite a few initiatives that are focused on that. One of them is kind of interesting, I think, because it's a great example of where technology is essentially helping to digitize an analog process. And we call it portfolio compare. And the way this capability works is it replicates the process that exists today in a lot of institutions where as advisors are getting to know either prospects or are serving existing clients, one of the things that many advisors want to know is essentially like, how much money do you have and where is it? And, you know, learning that as an advisor is very helpful because it helps you figure out, what you can do for the client. It also helps you figure out how to pitch your value prop to the client. Um, but those are benefits to the advisor in the home office, not the client. And so the benefit to the client in sharing this information is usually some sort of analysis on, what they're doing right or wrong in their portfolio. And so it's been a very kind of common sales practice to basically ask clients to bring in paper copies of all their statements. And then, when those statement copies come in, that usually gets handed off to like an analyst who like inputs that into some system, some analytical tool. And then that tool usually pumps out some report, right? Like, okay, we did this analysis of your portfolio. Here's what we found. Now, that's a very effective sales tool. It's a very effective way of showing the value add that an advisor can have for their clients, but it's an extremely laborious process. And so, that's usually a great recipe for, well, how can technology make that better? And so we kind of came up with this process called Portfolio Compare, where a client actually can just upload their data. And they can do that through aggregation. They can upload copies of their payments, of their statements. They can input that data manually. And in real time, we'll either grab their data from their institution, we'll extract that data from, a PDF, or we will take what was manually input and we'll produce an actual real-time analysis of that client's portfolio. And then we can help point out essentially where there might be issues. Are there issues with risk? Are there issues with fees and costs? Are there issues with tax efficiency? Is there home country bias? Are there, not enough diversification? Is there too much cash sitting idle? All kinds of analysis that we can essentially do for a client, but also for the advisor, because pointing out those issues can help convince the client that, the advisor can help them. And so we've kind of digitized that whole process. Advisor can do it with a client literally on the fly in a meeting. You don't need to ask clients to bring in copies of their statements. You don't need to wait until the next meeting. You don't need to pay an analyst to input that data into some system. It all happens literally within seconds. And advisors love it. I mean, it's just kind of night and day how much easier it is to explain instead of just like a generic sales pitch, like, oh, here's my name and here's what I do. And, it's a very personalized assessment for either a prospect client who, you're not doing business with yet, or an existing client where, maybe you're doing an annual client review with them. And there's a chance to kind of win more business. So that's one of a whole bunch of different capabilities that we've built and are building that essentially help make it easier to capture wallet share and grow assets.
So portfolio compare sounds to me like what we used to call current versus proposed, right? Get the
Sure.
client's current portfolio, show them what you're proposing, show them how bad what they have is now. Everyone's got to show that, and then help them to sell. So is this part of a proposal generation capability that you have, or is this a standalone tool?
Yeah, it is standalone, so you can use it by itself. But as you are correctly pointing out, it's really helpful to integrate this capability with proposal and then integrate that with onboarding. So for example, if we did a diagnostic and I brought in my 4 different accounts and then we found out, oh, you got this account at this institution that's like really poorly managed. If you go to the proposal step, then we can show exactly what we would do for you. And then if you go to the onboarding and funding step, we can digitally ACAT the accounts you just told us about into, the account at this institution. So all of those pieces are seamlessly woven together if you use, the totality of our ecosystem. And that is part of, our view on, having an ecosystem, which is the more of our solutions you're using together, the more powerful, the whole platform becomes. That's one of actually the pain points that we find a lot inside a bank is they've got lots of different systems that do lots of different things, but none of them talk to each other. And so you get a very disjointed, experience. So if you can kind of harmonize it and bring that all into technology that works well together, then, the advisor's experience is a lot more efficient and the client isn't left with, shock on their face about like why they have to do the same thing 3 times.
But let me just clarify, does SigFig have a proposal generation capability that advisors can use to generate a proposal start to finish, including portfolio compare?
Including, yes.
Excellent. Can you share how many of your advisors are using that?
I don't know off the top of my head. It's probably pretty close to all 6,000. It's a very common part of our workflow is,
Gotcha.
kind of that sales process.
And what percentage of your clients are banks versus broker dealers versus RIAs?
The vast majority of our partners are banks and wealth management firms. We tend to not serve individual RAs as much. We are an enterprise software company, so we tend to serve, institutions that are a little bit larger. Sometimes I cringe when I say that because our solutions can just as well serve an RIA. But our go-to-market machine, the team at SigFig that is out talking to the industry and seeking new clients and onboarding them and integrating all the technologies, they tend to focus on, institutions that are bigger. And so one day, I'm sure we will find a scalable way to serve RAs. We would love to serve RAs, but our go-to-market motion has tended to focus on, firms of scale.
And on that note, Mike, you have said it all. We're out of time. Where can our listeners find out more information about SigFig?
Yeah, sigfig.com was where you can kind of find it all. And, if anyone is interested in working with us, feel free to reach out and we'd love to have a conversation with you.
Fantastic. Mike, thank you so much for being here.
Yeah, thanks for having me. It's been fun.
Hey, it's Craig again. Here are my top 3 takeaways from this episode. There's some new features and products that have been released by SigFig, including the Engage virtual meeting product, which has some pretty cool features, and their portfolio compare tool, as well as trust and estate planning. They've got some things on the roadmap, which Mike talked about. I was impressed that SigFig is up to 50 billion in AUA, 1.5 million end investors, and 6,000 advisors. I also thought his unified desktop advisor workstation of the future comments were interesting. And some of the things they talked about AI. Now, Mike and I disagree a little bit about AI taking jobs or not taking jobs. Mike said they won't. It'll just shift them to something different. I said it will take jobs, but it'll create new jobs, which maybe is a bit of the same thing. Well, you've made it to the end of another episode of the Wealth Tech Today podcast. Thanks for listening. Before you go, head to our website, ezragroup.com, scroll to the bottom of the homepage, and sign up for our newsletter. Once a month, you'll receive an email chock full of wealth management goodness, news, information, updates. You will not be disappointed. Thanks again for listening, and talk to you all again next time.